Hello guys, I'm very happy to see you and I'm very happy to talk to you again. This video was inspired by a YouTube comment by It's Your Girl and ASMR who said, "Awesome video Lilia, please could you make more videos on teaching, in particular how to start tutoring. For me, would be really gripping to hear your story of how you started." So before we jump into this video, I'd really like to thank you everyone who submitted their questions. Yesterday on Facebook, I posted a little question where I asked you guys if you had any questions having to do with teaching English or my own professional experience that you would be interested in me tackling in my forthcoming video. So here's the video where I'm going to handle the questions, and I received so many. I didn't expect to get that many, and I'll share a few personal teaching experiences in a way that might be helpful to other teachers or those of you who are planning to start teaching. So this video is going to be a little bit of a ramble where I'll talk about myself, but also this video is going to be hopefully of some value to those of you guys who are in the teaching field, so we can see how many resonating experiences we have actually accumulated over our teaching careers. When I was preparing for my CAE exam, I had a teacher who said that whatever you're doing professionally, people are always interested in you as a person. And I couldn't agree more. I thought that we often don't allow ourselves to speak too much when we're teaching because we're aware of that teacher talking time and things like that. But very often it's okay to take a look at us teachers and our own well-being and see how we can contribute to the teaching community and how much we can learn by sharing our experiences with other teachers. So I do hope that those interesting personal experiences of mine will be as interesting as I hope for them to be. And I really hope that they brighten up your mood as a teacher, whatever you do, because the interaction that is happening right now is very close to a two-way street. And yeah, so you know guys, but I really care about you and I really care about the community of us, and I really appreciate us supporting each other and building a great team. So without further ado, let's get started. Before I move on, I'd really like to share some general info with you guys. I've been teaching English for about 11 years now, and I started when I was 16 years old. I started in a little Soviet flat with a rug on the wall, and I'm 27 now, so that makes 11 years of me being an English teacher, teaching people face to face professionally and always growing as a professional, at least trying as much as I can. So I think in about 2013 I started this YouTube channel, and that's where I started getting requests for online tutoring. So before that, I had been teaching solely face-to-face, inviting people to come over to my little flat where I had a whiteboard where I taught people, and I was really excited about that. So I decided to make that shift because it would allow me to meet people all over the world. I was really excited and a little bit overwhelmed with that idea. So I went for it, and I haven't regretted it ever since. I've always loved teaching. I've always loved languages. I created my own language when I was 10, was really clumsy, and I attempted to teach my friends during our school breaks, and I rented a maths classroom from our teacher, who was very kind to let me just gather some of my friends there, and we would teach and talk about our secret language, as many kids would do. And I wrote some educational books where I collected the wisdom of life, or the wisdom for life, when I was just about like 5 or 7 years old. And you know, a couple of days ago I ran across some of those in my balcony, and oh my god, I found those both awkward and really enjoyable. So well, hopefully that gives us a lovely idea of what my teaching experience has been like. So just diving into some of your specific questions, I'd love to say that I do appreciate the fact that many of the questions that came out on my Facebook feed had to do with failure. They had to do with my challenges and my insecurities, and I found that incredible because it showed me how much we have in common as teachers. And I know that many people on YouTube are talking about success these days. we're going out of our lengths to reach success, and we try to do whatever we can to be successful, to gain a massive audience, to get our channel to gain traction. But it's also equally important, as far as I can see it, to talk about our downs, not just our ups, but also our downs. Yeah, so I wish someone told me many of the things that I'm going to go through with you today when I was a novice teacher, because that would have put me at ease. And I really hope this video is like a happy pill for those of you who are experiencing a professional burnout, because I'll have quite a few questions having to do with that too. So let's dive into this Q&A session, and I hope I'll make it as interactive as I possibly can. So here's a great question from Marina. And Marina asks me to talk about my biggest professional success and failure. And I think I'll probably start with success, because that's something obviously everyone's really happy and proud to talk about. And I should probably say that what I would consider my biggest professional success would have to be the moment when I was invited to do a voiceover for a textbook for mainstream Ukrainian schools. So if you're a parent and your child is going to primary school, they're a first grader or a second grader, that would mean that starting next year, your child will study English using a textbook which is accompanied by my voice as a narrator. And I'm super, super proud, and that makes me really, really happy. So I did that in a professional studio with my favourite, best of all times sound engineer. His name is Maxim, and oh, just goodness, I had a whale of a time. And yeah, so I do hope that the result lives up to your expectations, though, if you're aware about that. And now, talking back to failure, I'm going to talk about a particular student that I had. And just to get it clear, I wouldn't say that that particular student would have to be my failure. It's rather my own attitude which turned the whole situation into a failure, and basically everything went wrong just because of my mode of thinking that I relied on back at that time. So I was teaching a business student, and she was like, you know, this VIP kind of student. So she was like, I think she was doing an administrative job somewhere in the top circles of the Ukrainian government. And obviously she was an experienced woman. She had her own well-formed attitude towards life. And I was invited to teach English to her. And with that woman, she gave me a very hard time by challenging me as an English teacher all the time. So I was in two minds in terms of teaching her, because the money was very good. She was one of my most highly paid jobs at that time, so I was in need for money. But I was really, really stressed out every time I left the room, and that was mainly due to the fact that that student, because she was very experienced in her own field, she also challenged me as an English teacher every time, because she kind of was like one of those people who like challenging your psychological beliefs. So I remember coming over her office one time and teaching something, and because, as you know guys, when I'm teaching English, I'm very often in my English mode. So when I'm speaking English, I'm speaking English. I'm not thinking in Russian, which is my first language. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to me to go back to my normal Russian speech when I'm speaking English. And many of you guys, if you've ever had private tutoring with me, you will know this, because when I have to go straight back to Russian, for instance, I can't do that in an instant, because my English accent is quite different, and the speech position that I take when I speak English is quite different. So I just cannot go back to my accentless Russian in a flash. And that very thing happened with me it happened to me rather, when I was teaching that student. So she asked me to explain something to her in Russian, and I just went back to Russian, but I started speaking with an accent, with an English accent, because I couldn't do that instantly. And that student said, "Oh, why are you speaking with an accent?" And I felt rubbish, because I thought that student might have thought that I'm kind of pretending to be more professional than I were, to be more professional than actually I would have been at that time, pretending to be a native speaker. And every time I said something, she really tried to pick on holes on everything I was saying. So she also referred back to her old teacher, to her previous teacher. She said, my former teacher told me I should do something like this, and now you're telling me that I should be doing it like that. And because she had formed a very close bond with that former teacher of hers, everything I did was really wrong, and that really stressed me out, that drained me psychologically, and I just felt very happy when when I went over that stage of my life. Having said that, I should probably say that I don't think my failure was my students' fault, because after that I learned to be in charge of my reaction. And I know that people may behave very differently towards us, but it's our responsibility not to let other people upset us. And by controlling my own reaction, I've persevered, and I think that I've been able to form a closer bond with many other students just by not letting people insult me or offend me, and also by not taking things personally. Not taking things personally, I think, is very important for us teachers, because if everyone, we all tend to think that the world is about us, and the world is trying to throw a pinch of salt at us. Actually, it's not true. Sometimes it's okay, but we're all really being consumed by our thinking that is about ourselves, and I think it's very often a pitfall we have to get through in our teaching though. So I do hope that answers your question, Marina. And right now, if we're talking confidence issues, there's a great question from Kelvin, who asked me, how do you deal with insecurity because you don't know enough, since English is not your first language? And I should probably say, and this is going to be a little confession, which is really private, but I'd really like to share it with you guys, because I do hope that it helps you shed some light on how we should position ourselves in the classroom. In the beginning of my career, just about for a year or so, I tried pretending I was a native speaker as a defence mechanism. I did that solely as a defence mechanism, because I thought that if I were considered as a native speaker, that would have brought me more opportunities as a teacher, and also my students would trust me a little bit more. But then I discovered that I was actually robbing myself of my strength, the fact that I've achieved reasonable fluency as a non-native speaker of English. So I opened up and I inspired students even more, because my English sounded more impressive to those students. So I was aware of the fact that my English maybe was not as refined as native speakers, but generally I thought that I shouldn't lie. I shouldn't lie to people. I should be very open. I should be very honest with people, because I could motivate my students by actually showing them that reaching a fluent level of English is actually possible without having to go to another country. And right now, if I'm aware of the fact that a student is asking me something where I haven't got the foggiest how to tackle their question, I just say, I don't know. Shall we just look it up on Google together? Or could you just look it up in a dictionary for me, please? Or can I just do it for you if the question is difficult and I have to think about it a bit more? I just try to say to the student that I will do it after the lesson, and I'll make sure that I'll go back to that student after the lesson and just tell them what their answer is. I'm trying to be very thankful to my students for uncovering my language weaknesses. I look up words after lessons and I always learn. I think it's really important for us teachers to realise that our education doesn't really come to an end when we graduate from a university. I think it carries on throughout our lives. And I also like to know that I have my personal strengths, so I focus on them. And just a great idea for you to uncover your personal strengths, if you like. There is a personal strengths survey on the internet, and it's like a psychological test where you can go and take it and see what your personal strengths are. Well, mine would have to be something like gratitude, kindness, perspective, and the top first would have to be appreciation of beauty. And when I took this test, I looked back at my personal strengths and they came out in that test, and I thought where my professional overlap could be. So how could I rely on that personal strength of mine in my teaching? And now it's way more enjoyable. I'm focusing less on my insecurities and reservations, and I'm looking more at my strengths and my own well-being. So just see the link below for the personal strengths link, and I do hope that helps you. And in connection with the previous question, here's a question from Mickey, who says, is it possible to reach native level proficiency without travelling to a native speaking country? And I should say absolutely. These days, 100% yes. Just watch YouTube. Listening is such a shortcut to speaking. I started watching daily vlogs when they were just appearing, and I introduced myself to that everyday language. I interacted with vloggers in my head because I didn't have any chance to actually get in touch with them directly. But I was like interacting with them, I was communicating to them, I was chatting with them in my head, and I tried talking about the same thing. So if I saw a person doing a vlog on the gifts that they got for their birthday, I tried talking about the same thing, and I tried incorporating as much of that person's vocabulary as I could as I was discussing my own experience. I also started surrounding myself with English, and you can also check my videos on this channel on how you can surround yourself with English, how you can create an English atmosphere in your home. So I've got a video on, I think, 21 best podcasts and some favourite YouTube channels of mine on which I personally watch and listen to daily to improve my English and to keep my English up to date. I've also got a video on integrating English into your life, and that's something you can do without having to travel to an Anglophone country, for example. I also tend to learn quite a lot about my hobbies in English, and I get books from Amazon to learn even more. And every now and then I talk to my native speaker friends, and that's also a great piece of practice, but I'm completely conscious of the fact that not everyone has a chance to do so. BBC podcasts, my favourite podcasts that I mentioned in some of those videos, please go and check them out. It all comes through listening. So your speaking is largely informed by what you listen to. So I hope that has answered your question, Nikki. Okay, so here's another question from Carmen. And I think this is an incredible question because it's a very open question. It's a very honest question, so to speak. And Carmen says, I take it that there is no discrimination in your country against hiring non-native speakers, however qualified they may be. But if there is, it would be great to hear about your experience, Lilia. And I think that's a great teaching question because it has to do with the bias in the teaching field that is happening when it has to do with local teachers feeling inferior to native speaker teachers, because there is an association in people's minds that if you're a native speaker, that ultimately makes your English way more proficient, and that means that just generally equals great teaching. So a native speaker equals great teaching, equals great students' results, equals getting the best results in your life possible. So here's my stance on that. When I go to conferences, I feel the encouragement, and teachers are very positive. However, in conferences, just to let you in behind the scenes if you haven't ever attended one. So normally in conferences, there are many speakers and there are quite a few sections. So let's say there are 4 kind of offline real life rooms where you can go at the same time. So for example, at 11 o'clock you might have up to 4 sessions run by various teachers, various speakers, and you can attend a session to your liking. And here's an interesting thing that I spot all the time. even though local teachers are always super creative, and I've met so many great local teachers who are just, bursting with ideas. They're fantastic. They're like an explosion of creativity. Native English teachers always get way more attendance in their sessions. So even in professional development, as teachers, we tend to stick to this idea that we have more to learn from native speaker teachers. I feel there is an emphasis on the quality of the English language, or in other words, the authenticity that a native speaker teacher can bring to the party when compared with a non-native English teacher. And that would have to be one of the reasons why I choose to work on my own fluency so hard. And also, another reason why native speakers might be so highly regarded in our Ukrainian community, the fact that the number of natives in Ukraine is relatively low in comparison with other European countries. And generally, I think Ukrainians are a very kind nation, so we're very friendly, and our activities are great, and we're really creative, and we really tend to apply ourselves to our teaching. But I would also have to say that there is a bias in terms of the income in Ukraine. Natives tend to be more highly paid, and I'm saying this from experience because I've interacted with quite a few Ukrainian teachers who are the local teachers, and I've also had a few conversations with native English teachers, both of whom work for private English schools here in Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine. And based on my conversations, I would probably have to come to a conclusion that Ukrainian teachers tend to get a lower income, so they kind of tend to get a little bit not as much valued, which in my opinion is a shame. Yeah, that's a difficult question to tackle, but thank you very much, Carmen, for bringing it up. I should probably say that private clients are looking for natives, especially for their children in Kiev a lot, and local teachers have to work harder. And yeah, so just generally to sum up, I should probably refer back to my British friend who once said when he came to Kiev that, guys, well, here I'm a superstar, but when I go back to London, I'm just a regular lad, you see. And yeah, so there we go. I had a few interview experiences in the past before I, settled in freelance teaching. I tried to get a normal job, and I went for a few interviews with 2 major linguistic centres here in Kiev, and I did not have my university degree at that time. So basically, I just went for those interview experiences, and I had to be honest with the person who was interviewing me, and I said, you see, I haven't even got a bachelor's degree. And because of my English, they said, oh, okay, Lilia, so, we'd be lovely to take you up on board. So please come and work for us. And because my English was good, you see, so the fluency level was great, and they were really willing in both of those linguistic centres to generally offer me a vacancy, offer me a job. So I could have landed a job very easily back at that time, but I didn't go for it. And, for good, because right now I'm teaching English on YouTube and I'm interacting with you guys. So obviously I think that's a great thing. Tanya is asking, how do you motivate students? That's a great question. I really love it. By looking after myself and taking care of my own well-being. You see, what happens in the lessons is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of work that happens for me personally behind the scenes. So I do quite a lot of well-being related and spiritual work behind the scenes. So I should say that I meditate a lot. I generally take care of my own nutrition. I make sure that I sleep the right number of hours. I exercise. I do some workouts. I do the mindful walking. I practice mindfulness. I try to calm my mind so that it's not busy, it's not overwhelmed with thoughts. And the reason I do that is because when I'm positive and confident, students always feel it non-verbally. So there are certain things that we don't have to communicate in words to our students. Our emotions are really contagious, and sometimes I do really feel discouraged, but I try to do something to prevent it in my own good time. So when I actually get down to teaching a student or working with a person, I only emanate happy energy. I only emanate and share the good vibes with that student. When we're in a good mood, we are contagious and we tend to learn more efficiently, I think. That's a scientifically proven fact, and that's something I really count upon when I'm teaching my lessons. And personalities are important. I always tend to tell my trainee teachers when I'm teaching teachers, when I'm training teachers, that our personalities is one thing that we bring into the classroom every time. So it's really important to work on our self-development, on our personal development. Generally, if we're talking about the technicality of motivating students, I tend to focus on something a student asks me to do. So I tend to rely on this personalised approach rather quite a lot. Never judging the student. I really appreciate it when a student comes to a class being really clear as to what they would like to do. If they're preparing for an exam, it's really important that we do the thing that the student feels like doing, and also if they know what works great for them, it's really important that we focus on that particular thing. Because very often teachers push their own agenda on the student, and sometimes it's great, but we shouldn't underestimate the fact that students are human beings who have probably gone through quite a few teaching experiences in their lives, and they are probably somewhat aware of what works and what doesn't work for them. So sometimes we should trust our students. We should always trust our students, shouldn't we? But yeah, if a student is very clear as to how they learn and why they learn and what methods of learning have worked for them in the past, we should probably target that student's particular individual needs and go with them. And here's another great question that has to do with psychology, and this one is asked by Natalia. And Natalia is asking, how are psychology and teaching so easily combined in your practice? What do all of the teacher-oriented seminars bring you, and who's your icon in this field? Yeah, and all of those are great questions, and you know that I love psychology. I really like looking for that overlap between psychology and language teaching. So you may expect I have a lot to say about this. Psychology and teaching, so how are they related? I should probably say that I recognise that I teach human beings. I love people, and my interest with psychology originated in my teenage years, because I had very stormy teenage years, and that helped me coin respect and empathy for other people's feelings and emotions. And generally, I should say that I love helping people. I always try to select activities that help students learn more about their own psyche. And very often my students walk out of the class having solved their life issues while learning English as well. And yeah, but generally, if you're aware with therapy, if you've ever had some private counselling in your life, I think you will know that therapy is about talking, and people are very willing to talk about their emotions. English is like a protective shield. So this is one great thing that I find about using English as an interactive medium to help me connect with my students' emotional well-being. So very often in their second language, people are not feeling as vulnerable as in their first language when they're saying very honest and very personal things, so people can relax and they can sometimes be even more open than with their friends in our lessons. So very often, I should probably say, our lessons are really therapeutic to my learners. And another important thing to mention is that I'm very excited to be occupying this niche of combining psychology and teaching English, because I find that particularly in this country, mainstream education is very often damaging to young people's psyche, and many poor souls leave mainstream school education feeling wounded, feeling really insecure. And I tend to use elements of therapy that includes conversations, and very often we go back to those past experiences and we work through those past experiences, and people have a chance to actually get those liberating experiences in their lessons. And I think that's one of the great things about connecting, establishing that rapport between myself and the student. And so if you're a teacher who is planning to incorporate more psychology work into your English lessons, here's my tip. Do it sincerely. Don't just do it, just because you feel you somehow have to do it or you just want to do it, because if you do it inappropriately, that might be damaging to a student's psyche as well. So you might actually harm your student emotionally if you're not aware of how you should do a therapeutic talk. But generally, I find that many people are naturally very good at talking to other people empathetically. So just letting yourself, be open and honest with your student and listening to them very closely without trying to assert your own ego while having a conversation with a student, that might bear fruit, I promise you. And yeah, Natalia's question also has to do with teacher-oriented seminars, and I should probably say that as a freelance teacher, I really appreciate a chance to interact with other people who are in the same field. So I tend to relate to my colleagues' experiences when I go to those conferences and see that I'm not alone in my struggles. And as far as my role models are concerned, I should probably name Mr. Duncan from Learn English with Mr. Duncan. And well, he's a great teacher and he also really loves nature, which is really resonating with me. So when I watch his videos, it's really they make me very happy, and as an English teacher I learn a lot from Mr. Duncan's videos as well, and Luke from Luke's English podcast as well would have to be one of my major inspirations in this field. Here's another great question from Tanya, and Tanya asks, Lilia, what do you do if you get tired of teaching? And that's a great question. I should probably say that, well, I would really like to break this question into two parts. First and foremost, I should say that I tend to do something else, and having many hobbies is really helpful. One of my greatest realizations having to do with my hobbies would have to do with the video, the TED Talk that I watched, which is called Multi-Potentialites. What if you don't have one true calling or anything like that? I should probably give you a link in the description box down below. And this is a TED Talk where the speaker talks about people who love having different interests, who pursue different interests, and that's an amazing talk. I'm a definite multi-potentialite. Even though I like to work in my mastery as a teaching professional, I still, I dabble in many things. I love learning about new things. I love learning about life. Metaphysical implications of quantum mechanics, you ask me. You will be very sorry you've asked. And generally, I do tend to think back to moments that brought me into teaching in the first place to revive my motivation. Yeah, so as you know, teaching people makes me very happy. That's my passion. I remind myself how much I love creating activities. I try to not to restrict myself from creating activities like if I feel like doing so. But sometimes I just have to get over myself and just start. I just have to kick off the lesson, get the ball rolling, and it always helps me when I get into the lesson and the energy starts flowing. Sometimes though, I may change a spot where I sit, wash my hair, wear nice clothes, go and grab a cup of coffee from my favourite coffee shop, and very often that helps. And yeah, I also really find it very important to work on my self-discipline. Right now, I'm moving into this second very important pinnacle point that I'd love to address here. I think there are two types of tiredness really. Well, first and foremost, there is like the physical feeling of being tired. That's when, you're feeling you need to get some good sleep, right? Or when the cortisol level, the adrenaline levels have been too high in your blood, and now it's time for you to just relax a little bit, to feel less tension, to just put your feet up, to maybe slouch or just relax or have a massage or things like that. And then there's mental tiredness. Mental tiredness is largely connected with our thoughts. So we tend to exacerbate everything by thinking negative thoughts. We tend to fire up this mental dialogue telling us, I'm feeling so tired. I'm feeling so tired. Oh, I'm so tired. I hate this teaching. I don't want to do it anymore. That's kind of really weird, isn't it? So generally, when I start getting those thoughts, I try to remind myself to stay present and act spontaneously. I'm currently going through a stage in my own development where I'm reminding myself all the time that I shouldn't think back to my past experiences, or I shouldn't think about my future experiences by fantasizing a lot. And what I should really focus on would have to be this present moment in time. And it really helps me because I can either think or I can focus on the present moment. And counterproductively, very paradoxically, when I focus on the present moment, I start getting into the feeling of flow. And because I consider teaching to be my mission, to be my passion, it really helps me because ideas start emerging, I start getting into the creative mode of thinking. Also, as a teacher, you might find it important to remind yourself that you don't have to do it by numbers. It's okay to violate the rules and see where it takes you. Reflection is really important. Teach a lesson and then think back to it and see what works, and be aware of the fact that your feelings are as indicative of your success as your students' reaction to the activities that you did, or the objective linguistic output, like something that your students will have learned after that lesson. In communicative language lessons, we're very often taught that we should we should follow a certain procedure to do it by numbers, pre-teach vocabulary, create some interest or things like that. It's great when you're just learning, you're a novice teacher, but it's also important to add your own creative spark because no two teachers' approaches are the same. I tend to do my teaching in one way, and I'm very sure another person would do it in their own way. So it's a kind of interesting thing, because I think that we all tend to bring a bit of our own personalities into our teaching, and that's amazing. That's just brilliant. Okay, here's a great question from Vadim, and Vadim asks, what do you hate most about teaching English, and what are your biggest weaknesses as an English teacher? I have to be honest, when I was thinking about that question, I couldn't sincerely find one thing that I hated about teaching English. I love teaching English, and there are certain occasions where I just meet a difficult student, a challenging student, a student who presents me with a challenging experience. And then I kind of use that as an opportunity to reflect on things, to reflect on my teaching. But I wouldn't say there is anything that I hate about teaching English. In terms of my weaknesses, yes, there is one. I really suck at translation. And every time a student is using their first language, in the past I would go like, oh no, what should I do? I felt really insecure, they're speaking Russian right now, oh my god, what is happening? I'm really losing track of what's happening in my class. But later on, I converted it into a strength. When I'm teaching Slavic students, I can speak both English and Russian, and that is a great tool, being able to speak a student's first language. That helps me a lot. So if a student can speak either Russian or Ukrainian, it's a gift. It's a gift. It's a treat. And I thank the universe for giving me that particular student. Here's a great question from Daniel, and Daniel asks, how does your native language compare to English, and how difficult or easy was it for you to learn it? I would say that English and Russian, or English and Ukrainian, are very, very different, and that's one of the main reasons why I do not recommend translation as the major method for acquiring English as a second language if the first language is kind of a Slavic one. I tend to give my students this analogy that English is like a forest, right? And Russian or Ukrainian is like an ocean. And they're both types of landscape, but they're very different types of landscape. So, for example, you can't just, get a fish and put it into a forest and say, okay fish, so can you just swim in there and feel comfy in there? It won't just work there. Or equally, you just can't get a tree and place it into an ocean environment and get that tree, operating in the very same way it would in the forest environment, which is its native environment. So certain things tend to be the same. So there are a few correlations, but you just cannot draw a parallel line between the Russian language and the English language. And generally that's how I would tackle that question. Therefore, I don't recommend translation as the main tool, but it may be fun to refer to translation, to resort to translation, for a bit of change, and also to show that, you're an open-minded teacher. You're not restricted to one particular method. You're very nimble, very fluid. You can do many things, and that's just amazing when you know how many tools you can use to teach English to a particular student. One of my big struggles that I had when I was learning English had to do with register. It was too formal because I didn't expose myself to listening as much as I should. So it was spotted by my CAE teacher, and he said, so you tend to speak a little bit like the Queen, so you should just, go colloquial and add a bit of slang and add a little bit of informal language to your English, and that will do. Here's a great question from Palmyra, and she says, my question should be, what helps you to remember new words? Associations. Playing them back. Playing the words and expressions back to myself in the voice of the person who said them. I think listening to people and keeping a vocabulary notebook is a really effective way to learn vocabulary. And generally, that's how I learn vocabulary. I tend to create a mental image, a mental note of a person who taught me the word or who said the word. And every time I go through my vocabulary notes, I do tend to bring that person's face or expression at the moment they were saying the word or expression back in my memory, and that's how I refer myself back to that particular person. I also tend to pick the words I like. I don't just learn word lists, because if I don't have an emotional investment into a word that I'm planning to learn, I won't be very successful at learning it. I know that for sure. So I tend to pick the words that are related to my present situation about my own life, and that's how I establish a personal connection with the word. So that's something I do. I've also got a video on vocabulary on this channel, Palmyra, so if you're interested you can go and explore that video. I think I should probably post the link to the video in the description box down below, so you can have a direct access to it if you want to. And here's a great question from Svetlana, and this is going to be the final question for us today. Svetlana asked, how did you make your pronunciation sound so perfect? Thanks, Svetlana, that's a great compliment. How did you learn so much advanced vocabulary? Where did you find your first client, and where do you find them now? And what courses for teachers have you finished? Yeah, so that's a great question. Pronunciation, as far as it's concerned, by copying. I do tend to celebrate and nourish the actress inside me. I really like copying people's accents, and I'm never afraid of making a fool of myself. So I chose my language model, and I try to emulate that language model for myself. So I really, really enjoyed that experience. I listened to my language model, to my accent model, and I paused every time I heard that person saying a phrase, and then I just said it myself, you see, and that was quite cool. In terms of vocabulary, I put down expressions that interest me and applied them to my own life. I try to think of the situations and scenarios that are happening to myself, and that's how I learn. So if I learn an idiom, I try to apply it to my own life, to think how I can say it with reference to my own experience. I also like to use words metaphorically, so if I have a word which is pretty straightforward, I really like to think of an alternative use of that word, and I have so much fun with vocabulary. I also think that's how you reach the perfect fluency, if you're able to make jokes in English, to make puns. Yeah, so that's how you learn it. In terms of getting clients, when I was just starting out, I registered a profile on a website that was called Parta, parta.com.ua, and then that's where I posted a little description of my teaching experience, and people got drawn to me based on that profile. Then I started my YouTube channel, and it still continues by now. So people come from YouTube, and and also my podcast, which I ran a few years ago, Lily's Sunday podcast. People got interested, and people send me emails, you know, just asking for tutorship and things like that. And yeah, I really appreciate it when people just get in touch saying how helpful they have found my videos or things. And also word of mouth recommendations. That would have to be number one source, well, probably equal to YouTube, for people getting enrolled for lessons with me. In terms of the courses, I would probably say that I've got a CELTA qualification, and that's the only teaching course I have done so far. I was thinking of doing Delta a few years ago, and I may still consider doing it. Not so sure, because the course tends to be quite expensive, and I'm not very sure if I would like to generally invest in that course right now at this stage of my life. I might do so in future, you never know what future's got in store for you, so that would have to be it. Okie dokie then. So that's quite a long video. I'm afraid to take a look at how long this video has been. Oh, actually, it's 48 minutes. I can't believe it. I would really like to thank you once again, guys, for submitting your questions. And if you'd like to submit your question in the future, make sure you follow me on Facebook, add me as a friend, and later on I might post some other question and answer videos for you guys to find out more about things that you find relevant. Thank you so much for sharing your very relevant questions with me today. I appreciate them all. And don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so yet. Well, time to subscribe if you're interested in teaching English positively. I'm planning on doing a little course on mindful teaching. And what I mean when I say mindful teaching is teaching with your students' well-being in mind and with your own well-being in mind. So I think we're transitioning into the stage of human development where psychology gets a greater emphasis, and we really need to take that into consideration. So our students' emotional well-being, our own emotional well-being, it's time to unveil our own insecurities and talk about our own insecurities and share those with the rest of the teaching community. Thank you for being such great support. I think I should probably wrap this up right now, and I'm going to be signing off very quickly. Make sure you give this video a like and post your comments down below. Tell me if my experiences have resonated with yours, and also please submit your further questions with video suggestions for me on what you would like to hear about more on this channel. I love you all, guys. Thank you so much for being there for me. Hope to talk to you again very soon. That was Lilia.